This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. We're in Calgary, Alberta, Canada for this week's episode of the podcast. Joining me is Mike Foniok from The Establishment. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Super honored to be here. Big fan of the podcast, and you guys have always been a huge inspiration to what we do here. And as a home brewer, growing up homebrewing, it's been amazing. So thank you.
Incredible. You guys actually have a breakout brewer story, or had a breakout brewer story in Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine years ago. We have since discontinued that story, and so you're amongst a very small number of Canadian breweries that have showed up in that, the breakout brewer program. And there's also, for subscribers of Craft Beer and Brewing, an establishment recipe on the Craft Beer and Brewing website. Anyway, as I was planning this trip up here to Canada and to Alberta, obviously for the Alberta Craft Brewers Conference and Awards and all of that stuff, which people have already heard here on the podcast by the time this airs, I figured, if I was going to go talk to one brewer who should be here in Calgary, because I have a very, very small amount of time. It's like, the Establishment's making really interesting beers, and you still are making really interesting beers. Mixed culture is still a big part of what you do. I should say a small part of what you sell and a big part of what you love to do.
Absolutely.
And we're going to keep it real about that, right? We're drinking a 2.9% table beer right now, and so obviously, something close to my heart. We're going to talk about table beer. You won a World Beer Cup Gold for your lambic-inspired Earlton Street, and a fascinating process behind that one, which even used a mixed culture IPA as part of the blend, pulling hops in interesting ways. As we're talking about some other stuff, you were using advanced hopped products and mixed culture beers, and the concept of that is just driving me wild. So we're going to have to talk about how you do that, how you think about flavor in these beers that are in these traditional styles. We're going to talk about you've got a process even on the hoppy side of bench trialing and using bench trialing to test out dry hops and test out your hop, the specific batches of hops or the specific lots that you might get through spot, as well as selection. We're going to talk about how you go about that. And, and here we are in Alberta. This is a place where lots of ingredients for beer are grown, particularly barley and particularly malt. I drove past the Canada malting facility here on my way over. You actually even work with a small Alberta hops grower to have some Alberta hops in your own beer. Maybe we'll talk about that too. We'll figure this out as we go along. Before we do that, for years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across the country. They're proud of the cool partnerships they've built, offering 24/7 service and support. They build with non-proprietary parts, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation. Their in-house engineering crew have been piping breweries, wineries, and distilleries for more than 30 years. They offer free piping design and consultation with the sale of every chiller they build. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com or call to discuss your next project. And brewers, what if your yeast could do more than just ferment? With Berkeley Yeast, it can. They bioengineer ordinary strains and make them extraordinary, enhancing the flavors you want and eliminating the ones you don't. Now, in addition to competitive pricing, they're offering free overnight shipping on 5+ barrel pitches. Try it out. If you don't love it, they'll happily refund you. So why settle for ordinary when you can brew with better yeast? Visit berkeleyyeast.com to learn more and start brewing with science on your side. Also, a day in the life of a brewer is packed enough as it is, so why not let Old Orchard assist with your R&D? Custom blend development is available through their innovative R&D lab, and their bulk division supplies a wide range of beverage segments, making it the one-stop shop for flavoring beer and beyond. More information and free samples are waiting at oldorchard.com/brewer. That's oldorchard.com/brewer. All right, Mike, give me the establishment story. For those who have not read the Scott Messenger Breakout Brewer story in Craft Beer and Brewing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Establishment is a craft brewery and tap room here in Calgary, Alberta. We opened our doors in 2019. And it's, I guess, best described as like a homebrewer passion project. So myself and my friends and fellow homebrewers, Brandon Hart and Dave Ronenberg, decided to, follow like see how deep down the rabbit hole of brewing we could go. And it turns out that hole is quite extensive. And and here we are 7 years later. So I think, origin story is kind of similar to, I think, a lot of other breweries. Maybe it's like engineer turned home brewer turned business operator and owner. And the home brewing journey for us centered a lot around BJCP styles and getting the BJCP certification. Eventually I ended up getting national BJCP, and that has kind of always been kind of like an ethos to us, is like always follow our palate. The beer is the boss. Even though I'm one of the owners and operators, I'm not the boss. The beer is the boss. And our mantra is quite simple. Is beer first, ask questions later, and just following that is like our core tenet. And I think that's got us here today. And it's kind of, I think it's kind of like a simple story. Maybe it's like, I don't know if it's a novel idea these days, but it's just like our idea was to open a brewery and just make great beer. And that was like, that's it. And that, I think you can kind of see that in our marketing as well. Like our branding is black and white, very crisp and clean. I think we believe that beer doesn't have to be crazy to be good. It just needs to be well crafted, excellent ingredients and balanced. And so that's kind of establishment in a nutshell. And I think we're known for our mixed culture barrel program for sure. And I think you mentioned this already, but even though, it only takes about 2% of our total volume in sales is our mixed culture program, it takes up about 50% of the floor space, about 50% of our mental space. And we're probably going to spend a lot of time talking about it in this podcast today. So it's a funny thing, mixed culture beer, but I think that's like really close to our hearts. We were always inspired by Belgian brewing practices, German brewing practices, just European beer in general. And it's something that we're going to continue doing, even though we kind of have to kind of right size that to the demand, because the demand for mixed culture beer isn't great. But I think it is a flavor that we want to share with people, because I think it's a flavor that is so important in beer overall. It's like the origins of beer is mixed culture beer. And so I think that's really important for us, and hopefully we can keep that going forever, essentially.
And brewers have gotten so good at making it so well over the last 15, 20 years. Now mixed culture beer is better than it's ever been everywhere. And unfortunately, there are fewer people that are focused in on what it is. I think we have a little bit of a branding problem there, because especially as natural wine seems to be turning people on to, enjoying a little bit of these funky flavors, it is all there in this style of beer. And so I don't think the final chapter on it has been written yet. And I am excited about it, but I think you're right. Like in this history of beer, there are things that should continue to exist, that we should continue to share and, express love around and keep alive, because they deserve to exist. And then we'll see what happens in the future as those things, maybe they come back around, or, maybe they just become these small passion projects for brewers that just really love them. But everything is cyclical in some way or other. What drove the interest in beer for you personally? Yeah.
So I think that goes back to about 2008. I was taking mechanical engineering in university, and they had this, the University of Calgary had an amazing internship program that sent a bunch of engineers to Switzerland to live for a year and work in a small town in Baden. And that's actually where I met my business partner now, Brandon. He was also on that trip. And this was before we were homebrewing. And we just got introduced to the European culture and just traveling pretty much every weekend, just like traveling to Germany, traveling to Belgium, and just like trying all these beers that we haven't been introduced to, and just these beautifully well executed, simple, traditional styles that like really opened up our eyes. And when we came back from the program a year later, we got to the liquor store and we're like, where are these flavors? Like, what the heck? So that really was the genesis for us to start craft brewing. And Brandon and I basically just went down the rabbit hole, like I said before. But I think a big part of that was, we got introduced to the BJCP program and started doing blind judging, which I think is like a key thing to develop a palate and eventually be able to make exceptional beer. Like, I always have this theory. It's like, if you can taste a beer and be able to have such a good refined palate that you can reverse engineer it and then brew that beer, that's like the holy grail of brewing. So that's always kind of like, that's always kind of been, important to us. It's like developing the palate, doing a lot of blind tasting. You get so surprised when you do blind tasting. It's like a humbling experience. It's like you think you know what the ingredients are, and then you look at the brand or you look at the beer you're drinking. You're like, oh my god, I totally thought that was a completely different style. It's like it's every time you learn something. So we spent a lot of time, focusing on that, and I was brewing a lot of lagers at the time, which I think is a little bit weird for a home brewer maybe, but my philosophy was, if you can brew a lager really, really well, you can pretty much brew every other style, because there's really nothing to hide behind in the delicate flavors, and that just came from the inspiration.
Getting things cold up here isn't as hard as it is in some parts
exactly.
of the southern
right.
United States.
Yeah, exactly. So that basement temperature is almost lager temperature in Canada, right? So, and so eventually I found myself running the homebrew competitions here at the Cowtown East Wranglers. Shout out to Cowtown East Wranglers, amazing homebrew club. And eventually got my national BJCP, and then I was competing in the Canadian homebrewing circuit, and I got second place in Canadian homebrewer in Canada. And it was like all these like pieces are just like falling into place, and I'm like, okay, this has to happen, right? So in Alberta, there was a bit of a weird law. So Alberta's like a really interesting place for craft beer, because the borders, like the provincial borders here, the regulations around liquor stores is fairly open. So there's a lot of private liquor stores here. You can pretty much sell any beer from around the world. So I think the consumer is introduced to a lot of interesting flavors and breweries from around the world, but they had these weird antiquated laws where you couldn't open a craft brewery unless it was like a massive size. So Alberta was really late to the game with craft breweries opening up. So when we were thinking about opening up, the laws had just changed. So it was like ripe for the taking, and we were just there at the right time and at the right place. And that was 2019. And yeah, I guess the rest is history. And yeah, and then the way is like, I met Dave at the homebrew club, I was homebrewing with Brandon, and we were just like, we have the same values, and just we're always so passionate about the beer. And that's just been a huge part of so important for us, and to protect that passion and to help proliferate that within our team here is like a very important thing for us. So
the beer comes first and the business follows the beer. And I think that's a beautiful way to drive this. I want to talk about some of that beer. Before we do, Indie Hops brings Oregon's natural wonder to brewers, celebrating 16 years of delivering compelling new hop varieties, along with classics that thrive in Oregon's terroir. Indie is the original source for Strata, Luminosa, Lorien, Meridian, and their newest variety, Audacia. Release your creativity with the magic of pure, uncut Oregon hops from Indie. Indie Hops, life is short. Let's make it flavorful. And looking for a powerful no-rinse sanitizer that gets the job done fast? Meet SanaClean PAA Pro from 5 Star Chemicals. This EPA-registered PAA-based acid sanitizer is tough on beer stone and perfect for everything from kegs to packaging lines. Available in 2 convenient sizes, it's ideal for coarse sprayers, fermenters, and more. Trusted by pros, designed for performance, SanaClean PAA Pro helps you brew with confidence. Learn more at 5starchemicals.com. Brew better, brew with 5 Star. Also, this episode is sponsored by PackTech, delivering craft beer multi-packing you can trust. PackTech's handles are made from 100% recycled plastic and are fully recyclable, helping breweries close the loop and advance the circular economy. With a minimalist design, durable functionality you can rely on, and custom color matching, PackTech helps brands stand out while staying sustainable. Trusted by craft brewers nationwide, they offer a smarter, sustainable way to carry your beer. To learn more, visit packtech-opi.com. That's PAKTECH-OPI.com. Well, where should we start in the mixed culture? Maybe we start small. Maybe we start with table beer, Mike, because it's what we're drinking now. And, I have been on this tear. We did this White Labs podcast with Chris White and others a few months ago. And as we were wrapping that up, and I was thinking about this idea, because, Chris's big thing is we need beer with very, very low sugar in it. It's not just, it's not just alcohol, it's low sugar. And so, like, how do you build dry, flavorful beer that also has good mouthfeel, that captures some of that, the kind of broadness where the yeast can produce some glycerol, where it can kind of, you can add some hops to it and help build some of that fullness, like do all of these things, but also have a beer that's, that finishes at 0 or pretty close to it. And table beer kind of made with a mixed culture fermentation seems to hit all of those notes of like flavorful, full, like good body, but also low alcohol, but really low sugar. And so I don't know. I've just been I don't know if I've been fixating on it for months now. And so the thought of talking about it, the way you brew table beer has been really exciting to me. Where do you start when you're thinking about it?
Yeah, I think drawing a lot of inspiration from Le Petit Prince and also beautiful beer. And also there's a brewery here in Calgary, in Vancouver, Daggerad, that makes a beautiful beer called Tous les Jours. It's a low ABV table beer as well. So those are two big inspirations for us.
Daggerad is one of the other Canadian breweries that has had a breakout brewer story written about them in the pages of Craft Beer and Brewing magazine.
Yeah, shout out to those guys. Absolutely amazing brewery and great people there. So those are the inspirations, and I think for us is achieving that balance for sure, and using like a lot of hops. Hops are super important in this style. We use our house culture is essentially bottle dregs from the homebrew era and a little bit of wild capture stuff that we kept propagating over the past 7 years here at the establishment. And we don't really have it stored, frozen cryogenically or whatever. It just lives in our barrels here. And so whenever we need
it's alive.
It's alive. It's like it's like a sourdough culture, right? You just keep it going. And whenever we need a little bit more, we'll grab a fresh barrel that we really like, and we can prop it up that way. So it's
until something weird happens, and then you lose the entire thing, and you're like, "Oh fuck, what am I going to do now?" Which has happened to certain mixed culture brewers that I've talked to on the podcast in the past.
Yeah, which is
bank it out somewhere.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah, exactly. But
of course, then growing it back up after you've banked it, that's all also a very imperfect thing as well.
Yeah, that's not very farmhouse of us to use a cryogenic freezer, right? No, no, but honestly, and it's so.
How did you select out this culture over all of those years? No, so when I drink it, it's very light, it's very lemony. The kind of funk component is the yeast isn't producing all of that, and with this, you're using hops in a way that are not necessarily going to, in the shorter amount of time, because this is a stainless steel fermentation also. As this beer is younger, I imagine it tastes a little different than if it were to sit around for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. I think in a nutshell, I would say that we work around our culture, and rather than trying to find one that works for us. So
we work around it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like pushing a shopping cart with a broken wheel. You can't necessarily, the brewer can kind of coax it in a certain direction, but ultimately it's going to kind of veer off to where it wants to go. I think that's where hops come in. So our culture is it has pedio, it has lacto, it has Brett, it has Sac. And we actually recently got it genetically sequenced, and we're going to be releasing, we're writing a technical paper on that. That's a whole another story. Maybe we can get to that, but it is, it's really hard to work around the pedio, because the pedio produces a ton of acid. And I think with many mixed culture programs, it's like, that's always the challenge, is like, how do you work around the acid? How do you control the acid? You don't want a ton of lactic acid, otherwise the beer's not drinkable. And so we use hops in large amounts to control that. And I think there's something to be said about the pedio that is super important to this style, in our opinion, because it actually creates a little bit of ropiness during the fermentation process, actually in package for us. And as those exopolysaccharides get broken down by the Brett, there's a little bit of body that's left behind. It doesn't completely go away. So the ropiness is like, it actually adds some body to the beer, and that's like super important for us. And I think in general, table beer
versus a non-pedio, versus like all lactic acid bacteria acidity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that is actually a way to build body into this beer, which this beer finishes at 2 gravity or half a Plato, and it's like completely dry basically, but it still has a little bit of that residual body. And I think a lot of that is actually coming from those leftover exopolysaccharides that get cleaned up by the Brett. But our philosophy with saison or table beer is there's almost kind of like two schools of thought. It's like, do you brew it like the Belgians do with Belgian ingredients and Belgian yeast? Or in our case, our philosophy is that, this is truly like Saison is a beer of time and place, and you use the ingredients that you have locally and the equipment that you have and the yeast that you have with you. So that's kind of our approach. It's like, Saison is a way of life, it's so that's
Saison is an algorithm. It's not the actual, it's not the input itself. It's, it's how you use them and an expression of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like I mentioned, we have this house culture and we learn how to work with it to create those flavors and to kind of coax it in the direction that we want it to go. And we use all local ingredients for Chaiselong, and it's we use Hogarth malt. It's a local maltster here, just 2 hours north of Calgary, that does organic floor malted Pilsner, which is unbelievable. And so, we're also using Water Valley hops for this beer. So it's a local producer of hops here.
You guys grow hops in Alberta?
Yeah, and it's not easy to grow hops at this altitude because the growing window is so short. So you get...
What's the altitude up here?
Oh, that's a really good question.
You could put it in meters.
Yeah, I think, oh man. Oh, I'm drawing a blank right now. But
we'll do the research. We'll throw it in the show notes.
But yeah, our growing window here is a lot shorter for hops. And so you don't get that maturity level. It starts getting frosty and cold at night, and the plants are dying before the lupulin develops.
Well, it doesn't warm up enough for them to truly start establishing probably until May.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas everyone else is planting in March.
Absolutely, yeah. And then the frosts come like right when it's harvest time. It's like, oh, it's getting actually frosty at night, and then so it changes the way that the hops are tasting here. And there's only certain varieties that are growing fast enough that we can use. But I think that's a big part of table beer and Saison for us is using the local ingredients and really showing a true time and place product. Yeah.
So then talk to me about both of those things. Talk to me about, building a malt bill for this very light beer that also builds that kind of body, floor malted pills. Is there something else to it?
Yeah. We're definitely using a lot of wheat. So about 20,
there was some wheat in this, just the fullness and the bigness and good foam.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about 20%, again, Hogarth malted wheat. And we're using, so this is all Hogarth ingredients, trying to keep it super local. And Hogarth chit. So there's about 10% chit malt in here. And I think chit's is a beautiful ingredient. We pretty much just put chit in every beer because it's the chit. And it gives
throw some more chit in it.
Yeah, just throw some more chit in it, honestly. And I mean
that's the Fiden solution, right? Hazy IPA.
That's right.
Chit malt. I mean, that's their thing.
Yeah, and we love using tons of chit in our hazies as well. But it's so that's basically the malt bill. It's Hogarth floor malted organic Pilsner, Hogarth malted wheat and chit, and it's about 42 IBUs. We dry hop it with
42 IBUs.
Yeah, it's 42 IBU.
Damn.
Yeah, 2.9%, 42 IBU.
Damn.
And honestly, yeah, we're really trying to make sure that
controlling that PDO.
We're trying to control the acidity. It completely completely suppresses the lacto. The lactose survives, but it really doesn't produce a lot of acid. It just kind of is a really small player in the background. But the PDO eventually creates that ropiness, a little bit of that acidity, and then once that breaks down that exopolysaccharide, you get that beautiful body that stays over at the end.
So these local hops that are producing 42 IBUs, are there specific varieties that kind of capture? Are you looking for old world character? I mean, if you're getting that many IBUs, you're probably adding a fair amount of them early on just to crank up that kind of bitterness.
Yeah, absolutely. We do use a fair amount early, but I think the main flavor component here is the most hype hop ever, and that's Fuggle. So Fuggle is just one of our favorites in this beer. We can't always get Fuggle. There's a certain amount that gets grown at Water Valley Hops. It's a very small amount. So that kind of switches between Fuggle and Nugget. So, the most hype hops ever as finishing, actually dry hops as well. So, we do dry hop this beer.
Dry hopped with Fuggle.
Yeah, that's right. It's so hype.
You're so uncool that you're cool again. Like, you've bypassed the uncool parents and gone straight to the grandparents' generation, and now it's cool again, right? I mean, that's how it all works.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's
so a lot of additions, through the hot side, and then,
Yep.
but how much, how do you split the hops between hot side and cold side?
Yeah, so there is a pretty sizable load at 60 minutes, and then we do kind of a smaller load around 10 minutes left in the boil, and then there's a pretty sizable whirlpool addition as well. And then once the beer is done fermenting, which takes a few weeks in tank, we'll dry hop it, and then that also spurs on a little bit of diastatic activity from the hops, and so that beer just continues fermenting a little bit. And then
Saison hop creep.
That's right. Yeah, get that thing as dry as possible, which is actually important for us because I don't think you really need a lot of residual sugars for Brett to create flavor in the beer, and we'll then package it in cans, 355 ml sleeks, and we'll re-yeast and re-sugar at that point. And that's where the waiting begins. Okay, so at this point,
conditioning.
Yeah, the can conditioning. So at this point, the beer's about 3 to 4 weeks in tank. It's fully fermented, like it's done. It's down to, like I mentioned, 2 gravity points or half Plato. And at this point, this is where the PDO tends to kick up a little bit, and it happens in can, unfortunately. In can, yeah. So we get the ropiness in the can, and that's where the waiting game begins. And we've noticed that when we brew this, so this is a core beer for us, which is kind of insane. But we brew this all year long, and we noticed when we package this beer in the winter, we don't really have a temperature controlled conditioning room. So the batches that we package in the winter, by virtue of the temperature that they're aging at, take almost forever to clear the rope. Like we're talking like 6 to 7 months.
Almost forever.
Yeah. It's like 7 months in can.
Oh, jeez.
Until it's like ready to. So we got to really plan ahead, and there's a lot of like storage space. Or
just get a warm room.
Yeah, I mean, get a warm room. We're thinking about it for sure. Yeah, but in the summer, it's ready in like 3 months. 3 months. It's a 3 month in can, 1 month in tank. It's 4 months. Like it's not a big deal, right?
Spoken like true home brewers turned professional brewers. Yeah. Totally manageable. Totally
Absolutely.
reasonable.
Yeah. But and we've talked about, so like shout out to Damon, who's our barrel program lead, and he's a big part of the design of this recipe, and he does the heavy lifting figuratively and physically with these styles of beers. But we've talked about pulling out the PDO, just literally taking it to a lab and just isolating it out and seeing how that works. But we just really don't want to, because I think it provides so much body impact in this beer that I think it's critical.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to argue with it. Like it is, like I said, light, lemony, citrusy, has some of that kind of, weedy character. There's definitely, it is not that far off from, say, a traditional Berliner Weiss, if it were a slightly different, kind of water and recipe composition and brewed in Germany or inspired by, there's a lot of flavor similarity. I was thinking about Schneeola's Marlene today, and there's certainly part of it's that recency, but there's a flavor connection there as well. But it's hard for a beer that is under 3% ABV to have that kind of body and drinkability is it's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, we're pretty pumped about it, and it's one of our we call it Chaise Long because all our beers here are pretty much inspired by songs and by music, and by music and musical references. And this one's the Wet Leg song Chaise Long, all day long on the Chaise Long. So yeah, it fits. Drink this beer all day long.
There you go. So let's crank things up a little bit and move from table beer into some of your other mixed culture stuff. And I would love to let's talk about your Earlton Street, your lambic inspired World Beer Cup gold medal winning beer. But before we do that, I think we probably should pour some so that I can taste this while
Absolutely.
we're talking about it.
I'll get to that. All right,
we have glasses in hand now, and we can properly discuss Earlton Street, your World Beer Cup gold medal winning lambic inspired beer. So talk about this. This is not a single stream beer, obviously. You have a good barrel program here. You've got lots of barrel stock, and you conceived of this beer as a blended beer using some different components to come together into the finished beer.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a blend of, and I think blending is like such a huge component of these styles of beers, and so that Earlton Street is our yearly anniversary blend, which exemplifies just non-adjuncted. Basically, we just go through our favorite barrels in the program, and we put them together. It's one of our most exciting blending sessions of the year, and it's over a course of many days because we want to recalibrate our palates every time. So we put together a blend, and we're like, okay, let's come back to it the next day. And we come back to it the next day and we're like, is this good? Okay, it's still good. That's amazing. Maybe we try something else. And so it takes a couple of days to actually get this blend down. But in this particular vintage, Earlton Street 2023, we did, it's a 3-barrel blend. So it's a puncheon of lambic inspired beer, a 225 liter barrel of an older lambic inspired beer. And then the 3rd barrel, which is the exciting one that I'm going to get to in a bit. But before I do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we make our lambic inspired beers. So it's
I love the teas. I love the teas. Just dangle it out in front. There's something weird and awesome to this. But when you make this lambic inspired beer, and obviously the different year blending strategy is core to kind of any kind of goose blend and typical. I imagine this is much like your table beer, some mix of a whole bunch of wheat and the rest of it being Pilsner.
Yeah, absolutely. So raw wheat, Pilsner, and again, we're using Hogarth malting, so we really try to use the local ingredients as much as possible. A ton of aged hops, and we're really just following méthode traditionnelle all the way through, except for two key parts, and these are kind of big parts, but that's kind of what makes this beer unique. I think is we don't have a cool ship. We don't do spontaneous fermentation. We do barrel fermentation with our house culture. And then the other thing that kind of deviates from
some of those lambic breweries do, but they don't talk about it.
Well, yeah, there we go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then the other
we won't open that can of worms. Exactly, that's a whole other matter.
Totally.
We clean our barrels with chains.
Totally. So, and the other thing is we re-yeast and re-sugar during bottling. So we're not using like a young lambic inspired as the priming. Sugar, we're actually using sugar, but yeah, essentially, extended boil, lots of aged hops, and I think that's actually like 3 hours.
3 hours.
Yeah, so it's a 3-hour boil. I think that adds a lot of that color. I mean, when you're just using wheat and like raw wheat and Pilsner, which is, by the way, really hard to use because we don't have any rakes in our mash tun, so it's just like mixing concrete. And we do with the turbid mash, you start with like a really low water to grist ratio, and you're literally like mixing concrete. It feels like it for the protein rest and all that. But anyway, besides
so you do go through a full turbid mash process.
Absolutely, and I think that's critical. The other, actually, probably the more important part, in my opinion, is the aged hops and whole leaf aged hops at a pretty decent dosage rate, so around 0.8 to 1 pounds per barrel, which is about 3.8 grams per liter, which is actually an amazing conversion. I don't know if you knew this one, but the conversion from pounds per barrel to grams per liter is the same as gallons to liter. So it's just 3.8, which is actually amazing. Anyway, I always have to do that in my head because when I'm listening to the podcast, there's a lot of pounds per barrel, and I'm like, wait, pounds per barrel, that's 2 pounds per barrel, so that's 3.8 times 2. Okay, cool. That's like 8. Okay, gotcha. So, but anyway, metric. Okay. But yeah, so I think aged hops are like such a critical component to this style, and although I mentioned BJCP many times, and like I'm a huge fan, and I think it's like an amazing resource, I think they still miss the mark a little bit on lambic. If you read the lambic guideline in the BJCP, they actually say there's no hop aroma and no hop flavor.
What?
In lambic and goose. Maybe there's a new revision recently, but yeah, and I think that like aged hops are such a huge component of this style. And yeah, so we embrace those heavily.
Are you using European noble hops, aged hops, or are you using something up from the United States?
Yeah,
we're not the United States, North America.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, North American hops, Liberty and Nugget actually, but we are slowly running out of those, and we're transitioning to actually using that Water Valley hops. They've got some really nice whole leaf aged that's like reaching that level, like past cheesy. And I think
Past cheesy.
yeah, past cheesy. So it goes through kind of like a cheesy phase where it kind of smells like feet and cheese. And I think once it goes past that and gets to like this marmalade tea-like character, that's when it really starts to shine, in my opinion. And that does take a long time. And I think it's critical that it's in whole leaf form. I don't subscribe to the pelletized versions. I just don't think that there's enough like oxygen impact. Like the pellet is literally preserving the hop from oxygen. I think the oxygen is a key component to the aging process. But anyway, I digress. But that is a key component.
Where do you age them around here?
We put them above our boiler room because it's hot up there, and they're just in large like Home Depot like leaf bags, like just paper bags. Yeah, lots of airflow and preventing any like mold or anything like that. So a lot of airflow, a lot of oxygen, and and then so that's essentially the grist and the hot side. And on the fermentation side, what we do is we select a barrel that we really like. Like I said, this is where our house culture lives in all our barrels, and I don't know if I've heard of anybody doing it this way, but maybe someone is doing it this way out there. But we take a barrel and we split it into two barrels. So we call this the mother barrel, and we essentially create a starter. So we create a starter culture by then running fresh wort into those two barrels. So basically, you start with a mother barrel, split it into two barrels, and then run fresh wort directly on that. Ideally hopped wort, like a German Pilsner, to keep that acidity down, to make sure that the lacto isn't growing like crazy. And then we wait a few days until we get like active fermentation. And then we take those two barrels once they're like actively fermenting, which takes sometimes a couple days. We split that out into usually about 12 barrels because that's our total batch of lambic inspired beer. And so each barrel will get about 1/6 of the starter culture. And then we run our turbid wort on top of that. And then we barrel ferment. And after the primary fermentation is over,
little Pilsner is just a good little yeast prop.
It's essentially just a little starter. It's just a starter.
Kind of wake it up before
Absolutely.
you throw the crazy turbid mash on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, because for us, I think even though it's a mixed culture beer, I think you have to give it the respect that the yeast needs. And I think I don't think you can just like throw a tiny amount of like bottle dregs into a giant 225 liters of wort and expect that it's going to become this like beautiful thing. It might, but we really want to give the yeast as much of a head start and a nice vigorous fermentation, and that's been working for us. And then
and that's the interesting thing when you say you're giving the wild yeast in that culture its head start, because now it's primed and ready to go, and so it's going to get anything that it can ferment out of that difficult to ferment turbid mash, that very dextrinous, thick, gross, wort that you're putting in there. Like anything that's instantly fermentable that could also, basically be opportunistically taken by other negative, elements that could, might be around environmental. Like the yeast is going to whip through all of that fermentable. And then you've just got the long chain stuff that's really hard to ferment for that culture to then work on over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also helps us control some of the acidity, because when you get the Saccharomyces that's active in our culture to really kick up at the beginning and just like crush through all those sugars, those simple sugars, it doesn't really leave a lot of sugars left over for the PDO to work on. So then that's another way that we control the acidity in this. And so it's one puncheon of that, and then a 225 liter barrel of an older version of lambic inspired. And then so the last part of this blend,
you should wait on the last part.
Oh yeah,
you should wait on the last part, Mike.
Sounds
we're
good.
gonna keep the teas going longer, and you're gonna tell us what the last part of that blend is. But first, when it comes to packaging your brew, think Heart Print, the original and digital can printing. With 3 locations across North America, the Heart Print team has your back from concept to can. Count on fast turnarounds, no minimums, graphic design support, and rock-solid can quality. All on 100% infinitely recyclable cans. Get 10% off your first can order when you mention the Beer and Brewing podcast. Open an account at heartprint.com or email info@heartprint.com for details. Also, Senos, the new leader in AI-driven fermentation sensing, analytics, and control for the brewing industry, is now taking orders for the most advanced intelligent sensing technology the Senos M3, the hardware connection into their Senos system. The Senos system platform delivers real-time fermentation control and predictive insights, giving brewers the tools to monitor key variables, detect issues before they escalate, achieve consistent outcomes, and eliminate waste with every batch. The Senos M3 is a modular in-tank sensor that delivers continuous real-time monitoring. The M3 captures 8 critical fermentation parameters throughout production. Turn your tank into a smart tank. Order your Senos M3 at senos.com. That's SENNOS.com. All right, Mike, I think we have properly teased. So let's talk about this third portion of the blend that goes into this beer.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the first two components are very, traditionally inspired. And I think the last component, which has been really inspiring us to actually brew a modern take on these styles, is mixed culture fermented barrel aged IPA. So essentially we're brewing an IPA with modern methods, with modern techniques, like, NP style, like North Park style, dip hopping with Dynaboost and using basically trying to create like the best IPA that we can, and then putting that, like this beautiful wort, like super hopped, and putting that in barrels and fermenting that on our mixed culture. And sometimes in certain cases,
dry hopping. Sounds like something that Scott and Mike at Sapwood would do. In fact, they do something similar to that to dramatically awesome results. There is something absolutely beautiful with modern hops, New Zealand hops, all of this expression within this mixed culture kind of space. It can produce some truly phenomenal beer.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been playing around with various techniques. So either we pull off an IPA that is currently in tank that's already been dry hopped, we put that in barrels, or sometimes we make a custom batch of IPA just specifically to go into barrels, and sometimes dry hopped, sometimes not, but we're just playing around with just like large modern hop loads with mixed culture. And I think it's just unbelievable flavor components that we get in extended barreling time. And usually on average, like our barrel blends are about 13 months residence time. So it's not like a crazy long time in barrel, but the aroma profiles we get is like overripe fruit, like just like tropical fruit that you've left over in your car on a hot summer day, and it's like almost rotting, and mix that with like potpourri, and it's so intense. And on its own, I think it's almost too much, but in a blend, it actually adds like this je ne sais quoi, or this qu'est-ce que le fuck, that is really hard to explain. And I think that you can kind of taste it in this beer. I think Earlton Street 2023 really smells like alembic, and then when you taste it, you get that aged hop, you get that funk, and when you taste it, it has like a balanced acidity, but it has this like kind of thirst quenching kind of like grapefruit kind of almost like sweetness on the mid palate. It's like fully attenuated, so obviously there's no sugars there, and I think some of that is coming from this IPA. And yeah, it's super exciting. So we're incorporating more and more of this into our blends.
And when as I do now thankfully get to travel to Belgium, I've been making it pretty much every year for the last several years. We'll be back there again this December. When you drink relatively fresh goose at the source in Brussels in the Seine Valley, it is not as funky as it normally is if it makes it to North America, because it hasn't aged very much, and it has these soft, fruity citrus characters.
Totally.
That lemon, the tangerine, clementine, these kind of bright, high-key citrus notes, and you're drinking it and you're thinking, I totally understand how people 50, 70, 80 years ago who did not have the same kind of access to fresh grown fruit that we do now in an industrial world could absolutely love this, because it captured all of that fruit flavor that we as human beings, we have naturally developed to be favorable towards those kinds of flavors. And yet it captures this in a beverage made with a completely different process. And so it's fascinating from that perspective. This, even though it's a couple of years old, still maintains some of that young goose or recently blended goose kind of liveliness and citric character that normally I think by this point would have started sharpening up a little bit and capturing. So it's interesting from my perspective tasting it.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and yeah, it's super exciting, and I think we're incorporating more and more of this into our barrel program, like this IPA technique. And currently we have, like, we've always started, like from day one we started with around 60 barrels. We're around 80 barrels right now. I would say that a third of, maybe it's slightly more than a third, is lambic inspired, and I think about a third is now becoming this IPA style beer. I don't even know what to call it, honestly. But yeah, it's and then the rest is just a really bitter, low acid saison that we use for blending when we do our fruited beers and things like that. But yeah, it's having those three separate, distinct flavor components in our barrel program allows us to create something that I think is truly special.
How do the modern hop products like Dynaboost figure into this beer that's ultimately going to go sit in a barrel and and age in this kind of somewhat oxidative kind of environment, intentionally oxidative? I'm just curious about this because normally we're always trying to keep oxygen as far away from all of this as you possibly can, but at the same time, as I talk to brewers today, a lot have started using some of these, abstracts or, other types of, highly concentrated flowable hop products because they do tend to carry a little more longevity through, you can get an extra month out of some of your packaged beer before they start to drop off. I'm curious about some of these in this kind of barrel zone where it's currently definitely the roughest kind of environment that these things can be subjected to.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think that the Brett just does a really good job capturing any oxygen that gets in, and we did notice that these beers are generally better when they're younger. And by young, I mean relatively young in the barrel age sense, so less than a year old in barrel. And so once we put it in the blend, like the aggregate average barrel residence time is around 13 months. But I think the mixed culture IPA is generally peaking around six months. But then it does drop off. And I think that once the bread activity kind of starts to drop off, then you start risking just turning the thing into vinegar. And
it's like, you got to use it.
Yeah, it's time to blend, or in some cases, it's time to dump, and that's just part of it. But luckily, that doesn't happen too often here. But yeah.
So for each of these components, is your IBU goal around that 42 number, or is some of that ultimate finished IBU number disproportionately, part of the wild IPA component versus, the lambic inspired component?
Yeah, I think around anything, it's usually around over. It's for our. We call it like our bitter saison or barrel aged Brett saison that we use as like a non-acid Brett blend component. That's upwards of 55 IBU. In these IPAs actually are essentially a hazy grist. So it's lots of malted oats, lots of flaked oats, raw wheat, which actually kind of like resembles a little bit like the turbid mash regime. Well, sure. not the turbid mash regime, but the grist. So a lot of like a lot of proteins, and the IBUs are actually not that high in that case. But I think it's actually the oils in the hop that prevent some of this lactic activity, not necessarily the alpha acids. So I think just by virtue of having so much hop oil in there, it inhibits the acid production.
That's fair. Yeah. And then and I love this idea of a multi-day blend session where you check your own assumption. Did we have it that because you just have to find a way to make it even more difficult than than it normally would have been already. So let's make our blending strategy take 3 days for this beer that is close to our heart, but is also not a very big commercial seller in some sense. Although if you got 12 casks of it, then it's not tiny. It's,
for sure.
It's not. You're not going to retire on that, but
No, and I think we've gained a bit of a reputation. This beer does sell well in the tap room. It's just it doesn't necessarily sell well when it hits the shelves, and it's a hand sold product. So I think there's a lot of education that goes around with it, and I think we're fortunate here enough that people kind of know what we're doing and know what we're doing is special, and they come here and seek it out specifically. So it works for us in the tap room, and we go through it, but yeah, unfortunately, it does kind of tend to collect dust on the shelf if you send it to liquor stores. But yeah,
that's all right. But it does, it does underscore that old quote from Jean Vanois of Cantillon that you can make this beer anywhere. That it is there is not, with the right process and adapting it to the place where you are, you can make great beers. And we've seen the same thing. We've seen great, inspired beer made in this kind of way in Texas, in the Texas Hill Country. I've seen great beer made in this style in south of LA. And of course, here we are in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, with World Beer Cup winning beer and the same kind of thing. It's truly fascinating. Let's, before we finish out, I do want to talk to you about, since we're already on the subject of hops, we're going to take that natural segue and talk about your approach to testing hops, because it is something you're not that far away from the Pacific Northwest and some of the main North American hop growing areas. And of course, you've got hops right here in Alberta too, but hops, figure well into this, both on the clean side. I hate even calling it clean, but the monocultural Saccharomyces side of the brewery, as well as the mixed culture side of that, and having expressive hops and making sure that the lots that you're buying go to the right place and are going to do the right thing for you is important. And you've developed a method in order to kind of not just really, I guess the question is, knowing what comes from a rub and makes it into actual beer, understanding what does make it and what doesn't make it, and how some of the things actually work. You've built a system in order to test how that will actually work in a dry hop kind of capacity. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we noticed, and this was like early on, that obviously some lots of hops are just not as good as others. And I think that's just a broad statement. And I think that every brewer knows that. But so we tried to figure out, like, early on in our infancy here at Establishment Brewing Company, we weren't unable to get any contracts where we can select our lots, and so we were kind of at the mercy of the spot market. And I think I think a lot of breweries of our size are kind of at that mercy a little bit. So what we developed is essentially just every time we do a new one-off IPA, which we do a lot, like we almost release a new beer every week here. It's actually insane. But every time we do
the
a
old
one-off,
homebrew mentality,
I know,
once again, right?
Just keep going. It's like,
make a new one.
Yeah, you look back at the year and you're like, wait, we did what? We did over 50 releases in a year? That's mental. But no, we love doing it, and we're just kind of used to that cadence now, and I think it pushes us to keep making better beer. But when we noticed that we got to figure out how to like get consistency when we didn't have the ability to select lots, and so we developed a method on the right before dry hopping, where it's actually quite simple. But again, it goes back to that like blind tasting thing, where we pull essentially 1 liter growlers off of the tank post VDK once the beer is clear or stable. I mean, stable gravity post VDK. We pull 1 liter growler samples, and we dose a specific amount of hops. If it's a West Coast IPA, it'd be like 15 grams a liter of a specific variety, and we do specific varieties in each growler, and then we try to keep those at the same temperature as we would be doing the dry hop, essentially the same time. Like we do a short contact dry hop with minimal agitation in the tank, so that's kind of easy to do for us to mimic that on the benchtop scale. And then what we do is we get the whole brew team together, and we do a blind evaluation of each of these hops. And we try to do a double blind. You can't really do a double blind because obviously someone has to put it together, and they try to blind themselves, but that's almost impossible. But it is essentially a blind evaluation, and we rate the hops based on our own. So each person basically rates number one if you think it's the best hop show, like how it's showing in that beer. 2 would be second favorite.
So just a straight
hedonic testing, absolutely. And we really try to think about quality and quantity of the aroma. So how punchy is the hop? Is it to style? Like if it's a West Coast IPA, we're looking for specific characteristics, and we also take into consideration some of the blending component of that, because sometimes there's a hop that's really dank that on its own might not be great, but in a small amount might just add a little extra. And so we do keep that in the back of our mind. And so we do this completely like silent, we essentially vote, and then we start talking about it once we tally it up, and we don't know what hops are in there. I mean, one person does, and eventually you kind of start figuring it out. But that's kind of part of like the good part about this exercise, and we do it quite often, and so it actually helps train our palate really well. It helps eliminate any lots that might not be super great, and there's these synergistic elements that happen that you don't expect. Like if you change your whirlpool hop, you might get some unknown synergistic effect with the dry hop, and it's surprising, and we're constantly getting surprised by it. And we do that for both our hazies and our West Coast, and it's been really great. And even with our selected lots, we throw our selected lots in there. Now we're fortunate enough to be able to select, and that's been great. And we've extended this process also to certain companies, like Freestyle Hop send pellet samples as pellet selection, which is like incredible. I think it's like great. So you're able to actually do this tabletop test with various pellet lots, and then be able to rub the pellets and then smell the pellets in the hop. Unbelievable. That actually helps like create that connection in your brain between like a rub sample and how it's going to express itself in the beer. So it's not only is it a great learning lesson for us brewers, it keeps us engaged, it keeps us like excited, and it keeps our palates growing and learning, but it also helps select really, really good hops.
And if you know if that's coming down the pipeline, then you can also make sure that you've got both hazy and clear West Coast style IPAs to pull those samples off of and see how those are going to work in both of those. And if they do work across all, it's an interesting learning thing. I guess the one question is, you then have open bags, so that's one of the pieces. And then, when you go from a straight rating of a single hop, dry hop, how does that then feed into a creative process of potentially blending some of these into a multi-hop dry hop?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, typically we're using 2 to 3 hops in our hazies and our West Coasts, and it would be like a lead hop, or maybe 2 lead hops and 1 supporting roll hop, and it you quickly learn kind of like which hops typically do really well in those styles. Like shout out to Motueka, like oh my god, nonstop freestyle Motueka, like almost all the time winning in hazies for us. Citra's a great player, and there's certain hops that just have like massive egos, like like Sabro and 1019, and those are just really hard to blend. Like it's like you use a little bit of it, and it's just like, dude, why don't you play nicer in the sandbox with these other hops like that? So our personal approach is to find like a good balance and some depth of characters. So you get this really fruity citrus expression from Citra, and you can like blend in some nice dankness from Mosaic, and then get some like, I don't know. It's such a, I know it adds tank time, and you mentioned the open bags of hops, but I think it's well worth that risk and that extra tank time for us. And we've been doing it, even like I mentioned, with the selected lots every time we brew a new IPA, and it's just like we learn so much from it. And I highly recommend people try it at least once, and just make sure you keep it blind. Don't talk about it at the table until everyone's done their evaluation, because bias is like the killer of this. So yeah, just keep it unbiased.
Yes, we have a forthcoming video class for Craft Beer and Brewing All Access subscribers about it's about a sensory program and overcoming that kind of bias. And the effect is absolutely real. If you've got a head brewer or brewmaster who speaks first, it's game over.
Totally.
It's completely pointless to even have the conversation after that, because you will find usually no points of difference, because you're right. You have to do a blind to come up with anything that's valuable.
And we also tally up the scores anonymously. So if there's a member of the team that might feel like their voice isn't heard as well, or maybe something like that, like we try to eliminate that as well. And I think that's important to building like a strong team effort together. Yeah, for sure.
Sure. Well, we're firm believers in blind tasting. We do quite a bit of that. In fact, last week we did all of our, actually, by the time people hear this, the time is all going to be messed up. Anyway, all of our judging for the magazine is all done blind, and all of the scoring is only done completely blind, and it's the only valuable way to find. And you think that things that rise to the top are the things that overcome any kind of outlier, individual, personal bias, and where you have multiple people all vibing on the same thing. And there's the thing, like the human senses are incredibly diverse. The way the humans come at this, individuals are very, very different, and yet there are some things that connect with more and more of those individuals at the same time, and finding what those things are and being able to lean into those is the important thing. Are there any things you've learned from the process? Like, has it impacted, say, like what hops you then throw in the whirlpool? Because now you're starting to see how these different dry hops work, and you're changing some of the other, upstream variables in order to impact some of your downstream variables.
Yeah, totally. That's a really good point. I think that is a huge factor for sure. And we've definitely, figured out what we do like and what works well. Idaho 7 in the whirlpool all the time, pretty much. And New Zealand hops in the whirlpool, holy, like, sheesh, incredible. But also, I think just visually, the difference between, and this is a stark difference. Like, I can't emphasize this enough, but the difference between certain hops on the color and the visual impact of the beer is insane. And when you line them all up together on the table, you're like, wow.
My little dry hop sample on this 1 gallon growler has just made this such a significant difference in the way that this beer looks.
Oh yeah, especially for hazies, like New Zealand hops, they absolutely stand out. And there's certain American hops that are just like, is this even a hazy anymore? Like it completely drops the beer clear almost. It's insane. So yeah, I would say that. Yeah, we're huge fans of NZ
So anything
hops
you don't use in hazy IPA for that reason?
Yeah, I mean, okay, like,
we're not talking about specific growers. We're just talking about
for sure.
Families and
Absolutely.
generalities.
No, for sure. I think Mosaic tends to be haze negative. It seems in our hop samples. Anything basically from New Zealand is just like haze, like super haze positive, like unbelievable, and it just creates this like milky, like almost flowery texture visually in the glass, and it's just like, oh. And honestly, that is a little bit of a bias, because like we drink with our eyes, and you look at that and you're like, how could I not pick that? But then you smell it and you're like, oh, this is also really great. So no, it's really good. So
you can just look at them and know which one has New Zealand hops in it just from checking out your sample.
Yeah,
you got to put them into like the little black cups now.
Opaque, and we've been thinking about that. But there's such a, honestly, the visual impact of that haze is so important in these styles that it's almost like you almost need that sensory feedback to help make the right decision.
All right. Well, we've been talking about brewing up to this point. Let's zoom out a little bit, talk about what the future holds. You guys started in 2019, 6 years into this crazy experiment, coming at it from homebrewers and engineers, making a lot of mixed culture beer because it's what you love to do. You make a lot of other beers that people love as well. But definitely we can sense the passion for what, just for beer and for brewing itself in, what you focus on and where you put, a lot of your creative energy and also investment of the brewery itself. Where do you think things are going for the next 3 years for you all?
I think we really love focusing on traditional styles and just proper serving methods and proper glassware and like really clean glassware and foam. It's just like, let's bring the love of foam back. And it's something that I don't think is like super prominently being used right now as a tool for innovation, I think, in Alberta. And I think that's something that we hope to be kind of leading is just like proper pours, the proper foam. Like our sample glassware here for our flights have like, they're not those little shaker glasses that are like filled to the brim. Like there's a proper headspace in there. You can get your nose in there and enjoy the beer, and just those little things. And that pairs really well with traditional styles and pilsners and just like really clean, well-made beers. And I think modern lagers are a huge thing for us. West Coast Pils, like shout out to that style. What an unbelievable style. Love that one. And it's just incredible to do iterations on it and just the beautiful drinkability that it offers with a modern touch. So, and that goes right up the alley of, just like a simple beer done well. And that's kind of what we're focusing on, and just always learning. And the team we have here on the production side is incredible. So shout out to them, Graham, Chelsea, Damon, Victor, and Mel, absolutely killing it. And couldn't do it without you guys. So thanks.
Well, the results speak for themselves. The beers are delicious, and that is a great place to bring this to a close. With G&T Chiller's 24/7 service and support, your brewery will never stop. Berkeley Yeast bioengineers ordinary strains to make them extraordinary. Old Orchard's R&D team will help you develop quality, cost-effective blends for your new beers. Release your creativity with the magic of pure, uncut Oregon hops from Indy. Santa Clean PAA Pro from 5 Star Chemicals is tough on beer stone and perfect for everything from kegs to packaging lines. PackTex handles are made from 100% recycled plastic and are fully recyclable. Heart Print has your back from concept to can, and turn your tank into a smart tank with the Senos M3 modular in-tank sensor. If you've enjoyed this podcast, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, and of course, check out the establishment recipe that we have there. It's like a Lichtenheiner with pineapple.
Yeah, absolutely.
How weird! How much weirder could we get there? Maybe we'll have to add one to the new one to the mix sometime soon here. I'll have Joe Stang get in touch with you about that. But if people want to learn more about the establishment, where can they find you, Mike, both in real life and out there on the internet?
Absolutely. Yeah, following us on our Instagram handle at @estbrew is probably the best, and our website, www.establishmentbrewing.ca. And follow us and talk to you soon, hopefully, and see you at the tap room.
Nice little spot up here in Calgary, Alberta. Worth the trip. We're going to finish off this bottle of Earlton Street and maybe get into a little bit more and more to come. Anyway, it's been great talking with you about brewing, Mike. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media @craftbeerbrew.